All right, this will be really not so much a sermon as it is just a teaching. We're going to see if we can complete the whole book of Daniel, both this morning and tonight. We'll split it up. Everybody sign aside. That's really pretty. That's right. That's really pretty challenging, even to split it up into two services. Right. But just to make it feel like it's some kind of a sermon, I'll give you a couple of points as we go through it. I'll title this, God the Master in Daniel, in the book of Daniel. And we'll see as we go through this whole thing that there's lessons being taught. And Daniel's learning these lessons all the way through, and Daniel outlives all of these other idiots who God uses to teach him these lessons. Let's get a little context for the book. I know this is not a good way to start in order to finish a book, but we're going to start in another book. 2 Kings 23, verse 33. 2 Kings 23, 33. This is the context for where Daniel is at the time this book starts. 2 Kings 23, verse 33. And Pharaoh Necho put him, Jehoahaz, in bonds at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And Pharaoh Necho make Eliakim, the son of Joash, king in the room of Joash his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim, and took Jehoahaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. Okay, so what's going on here is Egypt has become the big bad bear for the moment. Egypt always tries. Very rarely are they successful, but here they have been successful. Their territories running all the way from Egypt all the way up through Israel into Carchemish. And there's going to be a big battle that goes on up north, Carchemish. Well, in the meantime, Egypt, Pharaoh Necho has come in and he's taken the king off of the throne. And he's going to carry him back to Egypt and let him die there. And he puts a puppet on the throne in his place, his brother. And he changes his name just so everybody can see how powerful he is. I mean, what a big deal. But you know, there's something about changing somebody's name, because God does it. When you get saved, you start claiming the name Jesus Christ, Christian, and he says in Revelation, one of the special gifts he's going to give is he's going to give you a name that nobody knows. So there's something powerful about it. When you give birth to a child, you name them. Okay, that means you've got the power to do it. You created them. Okay, that's what Egypt is doing here. He's saying, I made him king, I'll make his name. And that's what he did. This is in 609 BC. Jehoahaz, the son of Joash, king of Judah, reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem before being deposed by Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho installs Jehoahaz, his brother, really named Eliakim, but of course he changes it, as the king, and lets his brother die in Egypt. Look at verse 35, 2 Kings 23, 35. The new puppet man. And Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh. That's Pharaoh Necho. Well, I guess he would. That's his new puppet master. And he taxed the land and gave the money according to the commandment of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver, the gold, so forth, so on. Verse 33. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebudah. However you say that. Huh? That's verse 36. The daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. Okay. All right, so here we are. Now we're down to about 605. In 605, Nebuchadnezzar, the crown prince of Babylon, tries to go against Egypt. Here's what's happened. Egypt, is in the south. They've worked their way north. They've come through Israel, and they're working their way up. If you were to, I don't have it on the map. Oh, in the back of your Bible, you've got some maps, probably. Let's see if I can find this quickly on a map. Yeah. An Assyrian Empire Map. Do you have that? Anybody find a map of the Assyrian Empire? Carchemish would be north. If you just keep going north of Damascus, about due north of Damascus, a little east of it, up by Haran. There's how far Egypt had made progress, and they were at that point heading toward Damascus. The road goes from there, comes back down through Nineveh, and heads down into Babylon. Well, Babylon says, no, we want it. So they're going to reverse the journey. They're going to come over and do this attack against Egypt at Carchemish. They do this. The one who's leading the battle is none other than Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is not king yet. His father's still alive. Nebuchadnezzar is the crown prince. And he routs Egypt. The Egyptian army is losing. And he's beating the socks off of them. Well, they start running home. The way they run home is the way they came, back through Israel and back down into Egypt. Hot on their trail is Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to do some damage. He's mad. So Jehoiakim, the puppet king that Egypt has placed in charge, when Nebuchadnezzar confronts him, he decides, hey, I don't like anything about Egypt, and they've got a puppet down here. I'll take him out too. So what does he do? He besieges Jerusalem. And as he's besieging Jerusalem, we're never going to finish this, I can already tell, because I've not even looked at the Bible yet. So as he's besieging Jerusalem, Jehoiakim, Mr. Puppet, comes out and says, hey, look, I've been looking for a new puppet master myself. And Babylon, you sound like a good one for me to, be submitting to. And he does. Well, he kind of had to, because he didn't want to, be destroyed. And so that happens. Nebuchadnezzar's happy. Okay, good. I got me a new puppet. But I'm on a journey. He's on a way to make Egypt pay. And so he follows all the way down into Egypt. When he gets into Egypt, he's doing damage to Egypt. But he gets word that his father has died. So that means now he's king. But if you're king and you're not sitting on the throne, its possession is 9/10 of the law. You lose it. So he runs back. As he's running back, the way he gets back there is he's got to go back the way he came. Well, that's back up through Israel, down through Carchemish, back down through Nineveh into Babylon. Well, he gets up to Israel and he says, hey, you know what? I got me some tribute out of this guy that's on the throne, and he was the puppet for Egypt. I think I'll take him back home with me. That'll be a good prize. When I come into town, not only am I now the king, I've got a retinue with me. I have a whole bunch of people I'm bringing as my slaves. I'll look good. And he does. Not only does he take the king, Jehoiakim, he also takes Daniel. This is where the nobles are picked. Anybody who's of the seed royal or the nobleman, he takes back with him. Now his plan in taking them back is not just to say that I did all of this, but it's to retrain them. He's got an institute of brainwash. What he intended was to put them in a 3-year institute, then send them back to their land as an extension of Babylon. And that's where we find Daniel. Daniel 1, verse 1. All right, we made it to verse 1. Yeah. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to call this chapter is God the Master of Providence, or provisions. God always provides for us. Now, it may not be the provision we think we want, but he always provides. Here in this chapter, you know the story well. This chapter is about You're in school. Not only are we giving you room and board, but we're giving you the best there can be as far as Babylonians are concerned. And we're going to give you all the best, rarest meat you've ever seen and all the king's provisions. So they'll feel like they're somebody. And, you know, that helps with the brainwashing. If you can get the tummy happy, usually the brain will follow. With men, anyway. Verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. Don't you think Daniel knew it? Sure. He knew he was a favorite. As a Christian, you should feel the same way. You and God, between you and God, you should feel like you're a favorite. You know the mess that he's overlooked and still talks to you. You should feel like a favorite. Daniel knew he was a favorite. You know what's tempting to do when you're the favorite? When you're the favorite, it's tempting to reciprocate. Daniel is, the hierarchy here is showing him favor, and yet Daniel's going to buck their system and say, nah, I don't like good food. You got any mush around here? And that's what he's going to do. Well, that's God providing what he needed, not what they wanted or probably what he really wanted. I mean, you see a big old juicy steak sitting there versus a bowl of mush. That'd be a tough choice, wouldn't it? But God provided exactly what he needed. This is in 605 BC. 2 years later, we go to chapter 2. 2 years later. I call this God the Master of Deadlines. This will be in 603 BC. Daniel 2, look at verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces. What's all the anger? He needs to go to anger management class, doesn't he? And your houses shall be made a dunghill. Wow, I don't think he's happy. He had a nightmare. He said, I don't know what this thing is. I've been training a bunch of magicians down there, and I want to make sure that they're true and not just fakes. So you need to come up here and you need to tell me what it was I dreamed and what I ate 3 days ago. And he wants to know that they can really contact the supernatural and they're not just telling some line. Look at verse 8. The king answered and said, I know of a certainty that you would gain the time because you see the thing's gone from me. He said, I know what you're going to do. You're going to say, oh, we need more time so you can delay and you can start coming up with tricks. There's not going to be any time given. You tell me right now or off with your head. Now, doesn't the world do that to us? Here's your deadline. You will do this by this date. Time is a terrorist. You don't live long before time starts becoming more and more of a terrorist. Verse 9. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have all prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. Verse 13. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. I guess nobody was quick enough. And they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Daniel's no exception. He's part of the crew. Whether he had an answer or not, he was going out with the ones that were called in on the floor. Verse 16. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time. Isn't that what he just said he was not doing? I'm not giving anybody time. Daniel says, hey, I got a great idea, guys. Why don't we just ask for more time? That's exactly what he said we weren't doing. And that he should show the king the interpretation. Verse 19. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. So the time is probably moved on from the afternoon to now it's nighttime. I'm hoping it went that fast. Maybe it was a day or two delayed. I don't know. But for sure, it's overnight. So overnight, God tells Daniel what was going on in the dream. Verse 20. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Now look at that. Verse 21. He, God, changeth the times. King kept saying, I'm not giving anybody time. But the king ain't the keeper of time. God is. God will change your deadlines. I've seen it so many times I couldn't even put all the stories together. Really, God controls our deadlines. Not the world, not our customers, not our bosses. God. God controls the deadlines. Okay, we learned that in chapter 2. In chapter 3, a few months later, this will be still in 603 BC. Remember, at this whole time, how long was Daniel's Institute supposed to last?
3 years.
3 years. We're coming down to the closing, but it's not, 3 years have not expired yet. Before the 3 years is up, God says, Daniel, you've already graduated. Let me show you. Daniel 3, look at verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. Okay, so now Nebuchadnezzar's got this dream of a golden image, and he set this thing up. Daniel had urgent business he had to get out of town for the party. He couldn't be in town for this one, but all his buddies were. And now the command is, you're going to bow down, you're going to worship. You're going to worship this golden image. Look at verse 12. There were certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. They're getting tattled on. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, have not regarded thee. Thy servants, they serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They got that right. And we shouldn't either. We shouldn't regard anything that's human, that's on this earth, more than we regard God, because we're his servants. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in a defiled land. They were in a pagan country. They were going through a pagan institute course, yet they were not submitted to it. They were submitted to God. We can go through some bad things. If America keeps heading the way that it's heading, we'll be in a rough country. We'll be in a rough time. However, we can still serve God. You can be God's servant regardless of where he puts you. Verse 15. Now, if you be ready, King says, I'm going to give you another chance. If you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, sackbut, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour, there's that time again, into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Well, sit back and watch. He's going to show you. In verse 17, it happens. They say, look, we're not bowing. He calls them up, said, I've already given you all the warning you're getting. Verse 17, they say, God can take care of us. He said, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. He said two things there. Your deadline, you can say this too. Two things. God can take care of this thing. And as a matter of fact, he's going to take care of it. Now, they're not naming and claiming and stomping their feet and demanding. Here's what they're saying, verse 18. But if not, if we're not breathing when he does the delivering, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast. Even if I'm dead, I'm not going to bow down to it. That's what they're saying. And God does deliver them. You know the story. Okay, so that's God mastering time. Deadline's not an issue. We've seen that. Now, that was... okay, so we're coming through Daniel. Daniel does something tricky. You've gone chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Now we're going to go to chapter 4, and then the timeline is going to skip. The book of Daniel, the chapters are not chronological, and I'm going to give them to you in chronological order. This made the book make a little more sense to me when I went through it. Daniel chapter 4, this is the next thing that happens. This is approximately 575 to 570 BC. I call this God the master of the human mind. Daniel 4, look at verse 14. Nebuchadnezzar has had another nightmare. And this one is bad news. He's scared to death. Here's the dream. There's this big tree, and these birds have come under there, and the beasts of the field get to rest under the shadow of it, and then something happens. Verse 14. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of the root in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast in the grass of the earth. He says, what we're going to do is this great big tree that everybody loved, we're going to chop it down, and I'm going to leave a root sticking out of the ground so that root can enjoy being beat up by the elements. Matter of fact, so that root doesn't think it can run away, let's put some iron and brass on it so it's stuck. Only decorations it gets are handcuffs. Verse 16. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him. Let 7 times pass over him. The interpretation is, Daniel comes in and says, Nebuchadnezzar, that tree is you, buddy. Sorry, I wish it was somebody else, but I got to tell you what God said. That tree is you. And one day this is going to happen to you. We're going to do this. He says, God's going to kick you out. How long is it going to be in time out there with the punishment? 7 times pass over him. For 7 years, God's going to put him in time out. That's just the system God uses. He likes the number 7, doesn't he? The tribulation is going to last 7 years. Don't let somebody tell you it's going to be 3.5 years. Every time punishment shows up, it's 7. All the way through. Even if he's dealing with a pagan, he still likes to use his number, 7. Look at verse 17. This matters by the decree of the watchers and the demand of the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. That's you. Now, we read that, and I know I've read it a little dramatic, but that's on purpose, because I think that's the message that's ringing in Nebuchadnezzar's ear. You know, Daniel might be the underling, but he realizes he's the prophet or he's the servant of God, and he's got to give the message from God. Daniel just had the nightmare about the king's nightmare. He's double scared. He comes in there and he's not mincing anything. He's telling them like it is. Daniel 4, look at verse 22. It is thou, O king, thou art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reached unto heaven, and thy dominion unto the end of the earth. You would think that that would be a good thing. You know, you've really risen up through the ranks, and you know, you're being successful. He said, no, the problem is 2 things. Pride, in verse 22, and then in verse 17, he didn't realize who was running the show. He's going to be punished for 7 years in order for something to happen. That the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. That's the knowledge men must have. It's going to come through the fall of Nebuchadnezzar. Whew. same thing the tribulation is about. Everybody's going to know that, isn't it? At the end of it, when he comes back and we come back with him, behind him, everybody's going to know it. Every eye's going to see him. It's going to be apparent. So whether you submit to it or not, at one point in life or death, you will submit to the Most High ruleth. And that's what he's learning here. Look down at verse 25. That they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen. You know the story. He goes through, he's running around there like an animal, eating, his fingernails grow out, and he's eating grass and all that crazy stuff. He's lost his mind. But it wasn't by his own doing. God took it from him. If a man won't submit to and recognize God as the Most High ruler, God takes their mind. There's only one way to get a sound mind, and that's to get in the Bible.
Amen.
To get God's mind. That's the only one that's sound.
Amen.
The longer you live, the more of your mind you lose. I mean, really, you do. Both physically. I mean, you start forgetting things and stuff like that. But really, if you're not getting in the Word of God to get His mind, the mind you have is not worth anything.
That's right.
And sometimes He'll take it from a person as a public punishment. And that's exactly what He's done here. Look at verse 29. At the end of 12 months, he was walking in the palace of the king of Babylon. Okay, so he's up here walking around. He walks on the walls. This is Babylon was probably at the time the capital of the world. I mean, you couldn't get a better city to live in. They say that 12 chariots could ride abreast across the walls. That's serious right there. So he's walking out here, he's strutting, and he thinks this. He thinks, I really have done something here. And I mean, from a human standpoint, he had. Verse 30, the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? No mention about the Most High ruling. Getting a little proud here, verse 31. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, along with your mind. Verse 24. If you find yourself here, remember it took 1 year from the time that Daniel interpreted this thing to him. It took him 1 year to forget about the dream. But it did come. In order to lengthen that 1 year, here's how you do it, verse 27. Daniel said, if you don't want to lose your mind right now, there's one way we can hit the pause button on the interpretation. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Do you deserve some punishment? You might have some punishment coming that you're due. Here's a way to hit the pause button on it. Break off your sins by righteousness. Get in the Bible, find out righteousness. Find out what you can get involved in that's righteousness. He says it'll lengthen your tranquility. That's peace. That's calm. We want that. He says the other thing you can do is you can show mercy to the poor. Now, it didn't say dollar bills to the poor. Sometimes you do that. But sometimes it's just mercy. It's just an ear. It's different things at different times. But don't neglect the poor just because they're poor. Because God can make us that way at a drop of a hat.
Amen.
Okay, now we're down to where the book is going to change. Now we're going to have to skip chapters, and I'll do that tonight. But just so you have the chronological order, here it is. Chapter 1 through chapter 4. Then it jumps to chapter 7. Then 7 through 8. Then you've got chapter 5 to 6. Then you've got chapter 9 to 12.